So I'm so glad you're all here. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Cara Roselle, your host for tonight. I am the NOFA Mass Education Director, and I also manage our soil health initiatives. Also assisting with hosting tonight is Jocelyn Lang, our incoming NOFA Mass Executive Director. Yeah. You are attending the session Soil Carbon, Raising More Better Food While Easing Climate Stress, with two of my favorite people and most important mentors, Julie Rawson and Jack Kittredge. Julie Rawson has been involved with NOFA Mass for 36 years and was our first and only executive director until this year. She's the farmer at Many Hands Organic Farm, a certified organic farm offering vegetables, meat, Thanksgiving turkeys, fruit, herbs, and other farm products through a CSA, restaurant, and grocery store accounts. Julie was actually the summer conference coordinator for many years, and this is her last summer conference as our executive director, but not her last as one of our star presenters. Jack Kittredge is Julie's husband and co-farmer, as well as the editor of The Natural Farmer, the quarterly print publication that our members receive. You should also know, because it's a fun fact, that Jack is also a board game designer and the co-creator of the original Dune board game, redesigned and re-released last year, so go check that out. Jack is also the creator of the NOFA Mass Carbon Proxy Test and is the author of our widely distributed Can Soil Carbon Restoration, Can Biology Do the Job? I'm putting the link in the chat right now, which is a white paper that has been widely distributed. It's actually been translated into 11 languages, and we've distributed something like 13,000 copies. So it's highly relevant to this talk tonight. And before we jump into their wonderful presentation, I just have a few details to review with you. So we have a number of sponsors who help make our conference possible, and I do encourage you to purchase from them, and when you do, let them know that you appreciate their support of NOFA. And of course, most importantly, we want to thank you for being here, for attending our first ever virtual conference in our nearly 50-year history. And thanks especially to our NOFA members who make our education and advocacy work possible. I want to pause and just take a moment to acknowledge that we are presenting tonight and attending and hosting this workshop in our various roles from land that was previously inhabited and managed prior to European colonization. So as attendees to this conference, you're going to see this slide many times throughout the conference. And I hope that every time you see this slide, you'll just take a moment to pause and consider both the indigenous people who lived here prior to European colonization, but also the intervening history that has led to certain kinds of people owning most of the land in this country. I think that's a really important framing for us as we do our work as land managers. So you can find this interactive map at this link that we will drop in the chat momentarily. And now, distinguished guests, we can begin our session. I am so excited to see what Jack and Julie have to teach us today, so I will now invite Julie to share her screen.
Get right to it. I think we are very concerned about, have been concerned about building soil carbon for a number of years and have been investigating the issues involved, and there are a number of issues involved. Primarily practices that we can do that would make the farming possible and viable and still build soil carbon. And those are the things that are difficult because farming has traditionally exhausted carbon in land, and we're trying to do a good job of farming. So we'll get to that, and hopefully we've got some ideas and things like that, but certainly there's a lot to be learned still in this as a very early science and practice that we're examining. Let's see, how can I advance the screen?
Try this once.
No buttons, I guess, huh?
How do we advance the screen?
Sometimes you have to re-click on the slide itself and then advance. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, but that worked.
Basically, the carbon is essential to all life on Earth because it's the atom of which all the organic molecules are built, the molecules of life. It's highly interactive with other molecules, and therefore that's why life has evolved in a way that selected carbon as a way to conduct itself. All life needs to ingest carbon to survive. It's all produced by plants as carbohydrates and advances from there. Carbon in the soils is crucial to plant productivity, as we'll discover, and carbon also enables soils to retain water. If you have, the scientists have estimated that if you have a 1% carbon in your soils, which is a low amount, you can certainly get more than that, that will retain in an acre of land 20,000 gallons of water, as opposed to having it wash off the top or erode the soil. So as you build carbon in soil, not only are you building healthier plants, you're also building the capacity in the soil to resist drought and to survive during flood periods, because it soaks up the rain. So it's a very useful thing to have. And the reason, I suppose people have always noticed how nature always, covers itself over, either with living plants and weeds and so forth, or with dead soil organic matter. You very seldom see bare soil for very long in nature. And this is because carbon in soil is very promiscuous. That is, it bonds very quickly and actively with other molecules. And it easily bonds with other elements. When it's in the presence of oxygen, for instance, it forms carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas which escapes into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, farmers don't always cover their soil. So since the atmosphere is full of oxygen, quickly that carbon gets lost to carbon dioxide and off into the air. So that's the basic problem that no-till has presented. And this problem has been going on for a long time, from ever since tillage began, basically. Scientists say that they have been able, through ice core measurements and other means, to determine the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere going back, further than 10,000 years. And one of the things they have noted is that with the very beginnings of agriculture in the Mesopotamian, in the river valleys of Mesopotamia, the carbon dioxide actually went up at that time in a significant measurable way. And they theorized because it was the beginnings of agriculture, and that was actually the beginnings of tillage and loose soil being exposed to the atmosphere.
Interrupt. We just have a quick question about whether you are willing to share your slides with anyone who requests them. They want to know if they should be taking really lots of notes or if they can refer to your slides later.
No, of course they can have them. Can you do that? Can you do that now for them, or?
We can figure out a way to do that. Yep.
These are not slides that I own. I got them off the internet largely. So with that caveat, I don't know, there may be some copyright issues involved here, but I figured nobody was going to shut me down for that. Here's a very interesting map, I think. Is that adequate, Carol? Here's a very interesting map of North America, and how over 500 years it compares cropping areas that we know with what's been happening in soil carbon over the last 500 years. And the losses, as you will see, occur almost entirely in annual cropping areas. You see the green areas are the areas that have been in pastures or trees and not tilled. And those are the areas where less than 0% carbon has been lost. In other words, where carbon has actually been accumulated in the soil. And those are places either in the mountains or in forested areas, or in areas where there's a lot of pasture and so forth. And the very dark orange are the areas where there's the highest loss of soil carbon, and up to 72% of the soil carbon has been lost over the last 500 years. And those are the areas right in the heart of our agricultural land in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and Iowa and so forth. So I can't think of a better demonstration of the very fact that farming is bad for soil carbon. Farming, as we traditionally have conducted it, is bad for soil carbon. Any questions about this map? That's all right. I wanted to dwell a few minutes on that and make sure that people understood that this is clearly demonstrated here. The same thing is true worldwide as well. And here's a worldwide map that does the same thing. The top map shows the areas in red, which are primarily cropping, and the areas in green, which are primarily grazing areas. And grazing is a form of agriculture that actually builds soil carbon because it doesn't involve tillage. It involves keeping land in growing crops year-round, and perennial crops, grass crops largely, and they're constantly adding carbon to the soil. So even though you're doing agriculture on them, grazing and perennial cropping and tree cropping and so forth are ways that you can do that agriculture without tillage, and that shows up directly in building soil carbon rather than losing it. So on the bottom map, you can see that those areas that were primarily red and cropping areas are either orange or darkish yellow in the bottom map, and those are the areas where the 25% or more up to 75% of the soil carbon has been lost. And the areas that are green in the top map are the areas where it primarily was grazing, and those are the areas where you see a little bit actually of blue, which is a building of soil carbon, and mostly it's a very light yellow, which means it's been a little bit of loss, but not very much. So these two maps, I think, are, and the black areas, of course, are where there's no data. So a good deal of the world we don't have good data on, but these demonstrate very well the correlation between annual cropping and loss of soil carbon. In fact, scientists estimate that about a third of the carbon dioxide emissions that we are currently tracking and are so problematic for our future in terms of greenhouse gases come not from the burning of fossil fuels, but from exposing soil to the air and by methods of land clearing and tillage. So, the problem that we have with greenhouse gases is also a problem that agriculture has, and agriculture can be an important part of being the solution. Excuse me. And this whole thing is a waste, and it's destructive. The loss of soil carbon creates climate change by, adding to the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and adding to greenhouse gas problems. Excuse me. And that drives heat in the atmosphere, which means more extreme weather. It also prevents the soil from storing the water and helping manage floods and droughts that we talked about before. And without the soil carbon, land is tending to erode, and that's been a serious problem for many years. And it also starves the soil organisms, which need that carbon to help your crops thrive. And that's the key thing I think that farmers don't really understand, haven't understood yet, is the importance of the organisms in the soil to help your plants grow and thrive. And if you want to have a productive farm or garden, then particularly if you're growing annuals, then you need those soil organisms to support those crops, and that is only going to be done if you can manage to keep some carbon in the soil. So what can we do? Basically, as farmers, we need to pump carbon actively into the soil, like happens in healthy pastures and forests. And there's only one realistic way to do that. And it's a very simple way. It's the free way that nature gets carbon into soil. And it's called photosynthesis. I'm sure everyone has, studied this in school, and may have read about it in more sophisticated forms in college and so forth. But it's a really miraculous process. It's hard to say and use any other word than miraculous.
Right.
Plants have evolved the ability to use a complex molecule called chlorophyll to use the energy of the sun to break down carbon dioxide in the air, separate it into its constituent parts, carbon and oxygen, and then also to take in water and break water down into its constituent parts, hydrogen and oxygen, and recombine them. So that now instead of, carbon dioxide and water, you have carbohydrates combining the carbon and the hydrogen and oxygen. It's a simple, mathematical equation, easy to write down, that basically takes what are widely available ingredients that are in many cases a waste product, combines them in a new way, and makes food and air, which are vital for the survival of all the animals and fungi and other life forms that aren't plants and don't create their own food. So I think the ability to understand how photosynthesis works and what it does is crucial to us being able to knowledgeably play a responsible role in farming. Those carbohydrates that the plant has created from carbon dioxide and water form, in part of them, form the plant parts and the stems and the leaves and the roots and so forth, and enable it to live, because the plant does consume some of those carbohydrates in its own life process. It, like every other organism, lives off carbon. It just is able to build food instead of just consume it. But the important part that I want to stress, and I don't think people have learned adequately, is that a lot of those carbohydrates that the plant creates are exuded or wept or expelled out of the roots of the plant as a sugary sap into the rhizosphere. The rhizosphere is this very small zone. It's almost like a sheath surrounding the roots, and it's a mixture of root tissue, soil, syrupy carbohydrates, and microbes. And the microbes are attracted to the syrupy carbohydrates because they are a source of carbon, which is vital for the microbes to survive. So plants, as a part of their life cycle, have evolved, many of them, not all plants do this, some, but most of them do. Plants have evolved the ability to exude this sugary sap into the rhizosphere, right out through the roots, and attract microbes to eat it. Now, a rational person might say, why in the world is a plant going to go to the trouble to manufacture these carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water and then just expel them out the roots again? And isn't that a waste? Why is the plant, wasting its resources that way? And the answer is a simple and a very, very interesting one. What actually happens to those carbohydrates is twofold. In one half, the plant eventually dies, and its parts, which contain largely those carbohydrates, decay into particulate matter, dead leaves, dead seeds, shriveled up roots, and so forth. This organic matter contains some nitrogen that's readily available, and of course the carbon that the carbon that is soon to become soil carbon, and is consumed by new plants and animals in the soil within a few years. It cycles, from 1 year to, at the very longest 50 years, depending on the environment and the temperature and so forth in the area. But that's a fairly short cycle for carbon in the soil. And that's the parts that are the visible parts of the plant. But the exudates, the carbon syrup, the sappy, sugary syrup that the carbon is exuding through the roots, has a different pathway. It's expelled out into the rhizosphere, and it contains a reasonable amount of nitrogen, but it's in a different form. It's not easily available to decay organisms. It is consumed often by microbes, and again made by the microbes into some of their end products, which are have a very long lifetime in the soil, sometimes as much as 10,000 years. And this is where scientists are beginning to realize and to find in their experiments that long-term soil carbon, humus, and other things that are associated with long-term soil carbon They come from the microbial deposits and the microbial products of life in the soil, and not just from dead and decaying plants, but they're from the complex digestive processes of microbes in attacking that exuded carbon. Why is that important? Because that carbon in the soil from that we call humus or other kinds of things is vitally important for the richness of your soil. And if you have an active soil carbon microbial population, you are in fact going to have a very much more fertile and productive farmland or garden. We want to encourage them to grow and to thrive. Then they will thrive if they have that exudate carbon, but the only way they can get more and continue to survive and thrive is to make sure that those plants are healthy. And that's the key thing that we should realize, that plants and microbes have made a deal. It's like many other deals in nature. Different life forms make an arrangement called symbiosis, where one will live at off the other one's expelled products or some other way, where they're both surviving because with the benefit of the other. And there are many examples of that in nature, but this is probably the most important. Bacteria, fungi, and the other soil organisms use their abilities to help plants thrive in exchange for getting carbohydrates as a sugary sap to eat from the plants. And plants, in their turn, supply those carbohydrates as long as organisms are providing what the plants understand to be useful services. Now the only question the question you might be asking is, what kind of services do these microbes do that help the plants along, and how can they how do the plants recognize them? The primary products of the microbial life in the soil are bacteria and fungi. And bacteria, I think there's 1 billion bacteria in a teaspoon of soil, and we've only begun to understand them, and it's a whole new branch of science that mostly we don't understand yet, is soil biology. But we do know that bacteria do pretty amazing things. They're one of the earliest forms of life on the earth, and they prepared the earth for the ability to support more complex life by doing things like fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere. These days, a lot of farmers get their nitrogen for their crops from fertilizer that's been produced chemically by a complex process that uses a lot of energy. But essentially, they are doing the same thing that bacteria can do without using that energy. They're taking nitrogen from the atmosphere, some 95% or something of the atmosphere is nitrogen, but it's in a form that's not usable by life. And it needs to be fixed, it needs to be made into N2, made from N2, I'm sorry, the inert gas, the nitrogen comes in naturally in the atmosphere, into ammonia or other forms, primarily ammonia, NH3. And bacteria do that very process. They do that largely through in leguminous plants by inhabiting the nodules and the plant roots, but they do it in many other ways as well. And a lot of ocean bacteria do that. So it's a pretty uniform process throughout throughout the world that bacteria are providing nitrogen. They're also synthesizing various hormones. They're amazing chemicals, as you know. Most pharmaceuticals have been produced somehow with microbial assistance because they have this incredible ability to synthesize chemicals. And a lot of plant growth promoting hormones, the PGPH there you see, are in fact originally synthesized by microbes, and plants have a way of signaling to microbes, chemically we think, when they're attacked by some sort of a disease or some sort of they have a need for some sort of chemical assistance, and around the roots of those plants, bacteria apparently pick up that signal and produce often those hormones that they need and help the plant to thrive and produce more exudates for the bacteria. Solubilizing phosphate is another. Phosphorus is a very hard mineral to get in farming. A lot of it is encased in rock form, and you have to dissolve it from the rock to get it. And there are a lot of chemical processes that we do that to get phosphate for farming. But again, bacteria and fungi do that themselves by exuding different kinds of enzymes that can break it down. And bacteria do that and bring phosphate, make phosphate available in that way. They also produce natural antibiotics and fungicides, again on demand, much like the phytohormones by the plant. And there are many, many other things. It's a whole science. When you attempt to talk about it in this talk, but believe me, that without a lot of bacteria in your soil, your plants are not going to do as well as they would do when you have a lot. And fungi are the other huge component of the soil microbial population. We see them primarily as mushrooms because mushroom is the fruiting body of a number of fungi, but the real body structure is this long, almost mop-like filamentous structure. We try to illustrate here in this graphic. It has these long thread-like hypha that actually exude enzymes, and the fungus digests things externally. It exudes the enzymes that digest things on the tips of these hypha, and it incorporates the hypha, the chemicals and nutrients it needs, and brings them through those long hypha through, its ability to transport them, often through water and so forth. So basically, here's this illustration is showing that a fungus is solubilizing phosphorus on a couple of rocks. The phosphate coating of rocks is solubilized by enzymes produced by the fungus. The fungus is also picking up some water from the underground stream off to the right there, and it's delivering this stuff as, phosphorus in water to the plant roots where the plant needs it. And this is obviously a huge benefit to the plant, because the plant would have to otherwise grow roots over all those rocks around them, somehow find a way to dissolve that phosphorus. And plants can manage to do that, but they're nowhere near as vigorous and don't thrive as well as if fungi are doing it for them in their neighborhood. So these are the kinds of services that life provides through symbiosis in the soil. And this is the kind of stuff we're just beginning to find out about. And, if any young people are watching this presentation, they might think about there's a whole world of new learning that's going to be available in soil science, I think, in the next 20 years or so. So I've talked about the ability of the fungi to solubilize things and to produce humus, which is one of the more stable forms of carbon. They also produce glomerulin. It's a recently discovered glycoprotein. I think it was discovered in 1996 or something. And it's the crucial protein which binds soil particles together into aggregates, those larger conglomerates of soil about the size of a raisin. If you pull a plant up by the roots in a healthy soil, you'll see these raisin-sized soil aggregates holding onto the roots, and healthy soil will have them. And these are the little, I liken them to a clean room in sort of manufacturing. They are the areas in which bacteria can do some of its chemical wonders, because they hold water in and exclude oxygen, both of those important processes to enable bacteria to do some of their complex work. Water would wash away the results, and oxygen would oxidize it more quickly than is necessary. So the production of these soil aggregates is just one of the many ways that fungi, by producing this soil protein, can help this whole process of symbiosis between the plants and the microbes. And fungi do many, many more things. And fungi are particularly susceptible to tilling, because tilling, when you do that, it tears through the long filamentous threads that they have, and it basically kills them. And every time you till, you're reducing the capacity of your soil to help your plants. And so that's one of the things that drives this no-till movement. There are many other organisms in the soil. There's the soil food web, as I'm sure you're well aware: algae, protozoas, nematodes, micro-arthropods, earthworms, insects, small vertebrates, and many other organisms perform vital services too. Many too much to go into here. But they all need carbon to live and function, and they know that it comes from healthy plant roots. How can we help these creatures get and store carbon and enable this process of symbiosis to happen in our farms and gardens? Well, by helping the microbes thrive, and it's the soil microbes that drive it. And basically, tillage and toxins are the things that kill off the microbes and denude the soil of the soil carbon it needs to be healthy. If we don't have tillage and toxins, then those soil organisms are going to be there. They're going to sequester exuded carbohydrates as humus and slowly build your soil carbon. To help them do this, basically, here are the practical things that you can do. And when Julie gets to her half of this talk, she will talk about how we're trying to do these things on our farm. Basically, keep soil green so that plants are always pumping carbon into the soil. And you can't do this totally in northern hemisphere, northern latitudes, but we can do it a lot through extending the season with greenhouses and hoop houses with cover crops, lots of other ways. You extend the season as many months as you can. If you can start things in April and have the soil green in April and keep that all the way through November, you're doing a nice job right where we are. Keep soil covered to protect it from wind and rain and erosion. If you can't keep it green, then keep mulch on it. Ideally, some sort of a mulch that will decay and build the soil carbon. We use all things from wood chips to hay to seaweed. We've all kinds of things as mulch. Any kind of living tissue is great. Some people use plastic mulches and so forth. They help in that purpose. We don't tend to use those here, but basically anything you can do to cover that soil and keep it from oxidizing. And never let the soil be brown, because then you're losing your carbon to the air. Shun chemicals, which is not hard for us to do as organic farmers. They destroy microbial activity. There is a version of no-till farming that uses herbicides to get no-till. And I want to clearly distinguish what we call no-till farming. It does not use chemicals from no-till farming that does use chemicals, including glyphosate. A lot of that goes on in the Midwest, and people say, oh yeah, I'm a no-till farmer. But you really have to check and say, well, what do you use for your soil fertility? What do you use to control weeds and so forth? If they're using chemicals and toxins, then they're not really building their microbial population. They're still killing it off.
Hey, Jack, we have a question here. Do you want to pause for a question?
Sure, yep.
So Heather is wondering, retilling, this must translate to raised beds as well.
You mean raised beds as is also indicative of loss of soil carbon if you have them exposed?
Heather, do you want to jump in for a second and clarify your question?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, because we have a number of raised beds that are in my care, and they're pretty high, and I'm covering them currently with a ground cover when I'm not actually planting on them. But I'm assuming many times, because this is a school, I have people mulching with live compost at the end of the season. So I'm wondering whether or not this compost should just be laid and left there so that we don't disturb anything that has been planted previously, or should we just gently, hand till this in a little bit? And maybe you could talk about that as well.
Sure. I think Julie wants to put her orient on this, but let me say one thing first. I think no matter the form of your garden, whether it's it's row crops or raised beds or terraces or whatever, the same principles apply. I don't think any one kind of format is necessarily going to solve all your problems or be better than another. So lots of options there.
Okay.
Just to say that I think whenever possible, leave growing things on the soil. So if you add compost, that's great, but just leave the plants there. Even better, you're talking about the fall. You want to have cleanup and such. Is that you're talking
Yes,
about?
that's correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just plant some cover crops there. Plant oats, for example. Oats are amazing at soil fumigation. They take out all sorts of bad things. But as soon as you can, as soon as your plants are big enough, I plant some cover crops there to extend the season as long as you can into the winter.
Okay, thank you. Helpful. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no, good. Just the last couple of things on this slide. To rotate your crops, we rotate them not only among themselves but with animals, and we think nature put plants and animals together everywhere for a good reason, because each one uses the byproduct of the other to thrive. And if you can do that, again, these things are all ways to duplicate what's happening in nature, really. And agriculture is not a natural process. It's a man-made process for man-made purposes. And so everything we're doing is a complex way of trying to find ways to understand why nature is doing things and to do them in a way that also maintains the farm viability, obviously, that we have to do. That's why at the beginning I prefaced this with this. It's an ongoing experiment, lesson. We don't have all the answers. There's lots of processes and materials and steps that we need yet to work out to do a good job at this. But I'm pretty convinced that we are on. This is the way that we have to begin to move if we want to be successful. And basically, I just, you see a little bit on the hand on your left there is a healthier soil that has earthworms and life in it, and has soil aggregates that make it, not clumped together as one big thing, but have lots of different levels of clumpingness. And on your right, you have something that's more like the life is out of it, and it's more like a dead material. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Julie, who's going to talk about the practical day-to-day ways to achieve all these things that we've worked out.
All right. So I put this, this year, I don't know, I think a lot of you have been to my Jack's and my workshops many times, and so I try to change things up a bit, and I was trying to be honest with myself about not just showing pretty pictures about when they're going well, because there are often things are going well, and often things aren't going well on the farm. But this is a picture of our potatoes in 2019 when they were just out of this world. And as is often the case, you have something wonderful one year, you think, oh, I got that all figured out, and then the next year you have problems again. So, but this is what things can be. I think we always want to have a vision for what things can be, and then we can that helps us get there. So just to give you a little background for people who don't know us, we are certified organic. We've been that way since 1987. We do vegetables, maybe a little more than 3 acres this year. We added a little bit this year because of COVID. We have fruit on about 1 acre. We do 250 meat birds, 100 turkeys, 150 layers, 6 pigs. We have about 7 acres of grassland, which doubles as pasture and hay, and sometimes other things too, but it's pretty busy grassland that we recycle for many purposes. And then we have about 44 acres of woods, so nice central mass land with, we've had to work a little bit to find enough land to put into vegetables because of, as Jack always puts it, rocks, trees, and swamp. A lot of that going on in our property. We do mineral balancing with soil amendments as per soil tests annually. So we get those done, and then we work to do some mineral balancing with rock powders and things like that. And we do that via a Logan Labs test, and I'll be talking later, but I work with Advancing Eco Agriculture, and they help me, go through that test and figure out what kind of soil amendments we need to do. Usually in the fall, some of them are spring, depending on what kind of things they are. We don't use tillage equipment. We used to till for about 32 years or something like that, and then we stopped doing that in 2016, I think, totally. Last year we did purchase what we call a ripper, which is a toolbar I'll show you that we put on the back of our tractor to help do a little subsoiling and a little bit of soil decompaction, but we try to use that only once per year at tops on any of our land. We use our tractor and our rotary mower and our hand mowers and a rogue hoe. Take that one down if you're going to be doing any significant work more with hands than you used to. A rogue hoe is a very strong, heavy. It's heavy, but it's a really good hoe for bed prep. We do use heavy mulch in season: cardboard, hay, chips, leaves, whatever we can find. Cover crops whenever possible. I think that's a really important one. The cover crops take a lot of thinking, but they're going to be your best bet, I think, to help build the soil while you're trying to do everything else. And that's in the season, it's pre-season, and it's post-season. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. silage tarps to kill things in season. So it's a big black, white on one side, black on the other. Lay them out and, you know, nail them down however you want to do it. And you can basically kill the greenery that's there in a very kind of a passive way, rather than, you know, using herbicides. Perennial strips to maximize biodiversity. And we just have thrown some of those into our annual gardens. It's nice when you don't think about using the tractor all the time, or sometimes not at all, in an area where you can put a perennial bed in there and just have a lot of other fun things going on. And we're always wanting to encourage the, you know, the insects that eat other insects. They're the ones who we're trying to get into the system, because they're going to help us with our potential problems that we'll have with the vegetarians. And then one of the major pieces that's really what we have moved toward in the last few years is the extensive use of liquid fertility at planting and weekly and foliar application. And then we do it in consultation with Advancing Eco-Agriculture. So let's just give you a little bit of a nutshell of what we're up to.
Julie, can you take a question?
Yes.
Awesome. So Mabel's wondering, what greenery are you killing with the silage tarps? Is it essentially a mulch, or is it to kill weeds, or both?
Actually, this year what we did, Mabel, was we decided, because of the excessive, and I have to use the word excessive, interest in our food. We've been here for almost 40 years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we want some of that food now, because people were worried about whether or not they were going to be able to eat this year. And we decided to put some more land into production. So what we did was our hayfield, which had never ever been anything other than a hayfield in the last 40 years, we laid down the silage tarps and left them there for 3 months, essentially. And I'll show you that in a minute, what that looks like. It turned out pretty nice. So so here's some things that I was trying to think about as I put together this workshop, and to keep it a little fresh, I guess, and to keep some of the learnings that we've had this year in the forefront. So balancing practicality in the moment with a long-term soil and ecological, what happens with, how do I move these people out of the way so I can read this all the way? And ecological improvement while planning for maximum productivity and economic sustainability. One of the things that we, for the first time, I've been EDing for NOFA Mass for a long time, and it's been my major job, and I've been kind of farming on the side with help from others, but never being able to put my full energy into that. And so we've been able to limp along and basically break even every year on the farm. And one of the things that we're actually seeing this year is a possibility to actually make a little money on the farm, which is very exciting. As I slow down, I'll be leaving NOFA at the end of August and put more time into the farm and can really focus more. So making our farm a place for people to learn how to work in the context of nature, growth, sensitive being, stress, personal, and economic living, engage in an alternative lifestyle. So I've always enjoyed having lots of people around, and I love managing lots of people. That has brought to us a huge number of people who lost their jobs, at least temporarily, college students who, you know, got tired of just being online the whole time. We just had a couple of Boy Scouts today who normally would be lifeguarding at their local, you know, at their local pond, but they can't get those jobs. You know, people from all ages. Another woman who was a veterinarian who lost her job in a veterinary clinic just started working for us. And the other thing is that we jumped into woofing. The willing workers on organic farms have been getting people from all over the world and all over the country who want to come and spend some time at the farm. And so it's been very exciting here this year to be working with all these people who really want, this is so important. One of the young women who came to us recently said, it's the only thing that we have to do right now. We have to raise food. And, you know, she said it with such conviction, but it's so exciting that People are, you know, I've been in this movement for a long time. I grew up on a farm and been in NOFA for the last, 40 years or so. And it's so exciting that so many people are saying all these things that many of us have been saying, lots of our lives, that this is where it's at right now. So engaging in a very diverse system that includes annuals and perennials, vegetables, herbs, tree fruit, small fruit, chickens, pigs, turkeys, with the goal of building and improving the carbon balance in the soil. So I just wanted to, I won't spend a whole lot of time on the animals, but as Jack said, the pastures and the grasslands and the forests are a place where there's a lot of carbon being sequestered pretty neatly all the time. And as we grow, whatever our system is, wherever we are, we need to think about how we can best enhance that. And I think having this diverse system, and we're very lucky because we have enough land to do some fun things on, we can stack these functions and make that happen as much as possible. The other goal here, which has been, a forever goal, is to raise food of the highest nutrient quality possible. So, and at the same time, while raising that food of a high nutrient quality, it's again, I guess like I feel about COVID, I feel about, insect problems on the farm. If there's something wrong where we have an insect problem, infestation, it means that things are out of balance. And so rather than getting out the killer, the bug killers or whatever, we need to figure out what is it that those crops are missing, that they have all of a sudden become a target for ill health and for these insects coming up. Basically, a lot of folks out there say, insects are nature's garbage collectors. The vegetarian insects, they come in to take out a crop that is not worth keeping. So we're gonna, always look and say, what's wrong with my practices here that I'm having this insect infestation. At the same time that's happening, no bugs or less bugs, the food tastes really good. And then the CSA members go crazy. It's like, whoa, I didn't think I liked Swiss chard. I thought it was bitter. Oh, this stuff is sweet, all down the line. It's just people are like overwhelmed by how good things taste when they're full of nutrients. So the final thing is that, and this has just really come out this year, I haven't really thought about so much. I mean, I've always said, people say, well, so-and-so gave me this cold, or so-and-so gave me this or that. And I've always been one to say, I'm in charge of my own immune system. But now I'm really, faced with that here with the whole pandemic thing, and that we are in charge of our own immune systems, and that we, here, we want to take a stand and live a life of fearlessness in the face of pandemics, celebrate enhancing the gut biome to do its job, supported by the crops that are supported by a diverse and healthy soil biome. So these work together. Crops that are healthy make healthy people, and where everybody's on top of their game. As a farmer, to promote and practice the principle of food that can be medicine. And also at the tender age of 67, and if I want to work outside all day in the heat and really bust it out all day with my Rogue hoe and keep up with the kids in their 20s and 30s, usually I try to stay ahead of them in terms of my physical stamina. I have to keep my health pretty good in order to keep that going. So those are our goals. New reality. The pandemic has brought us a huge influx of customers. The very first thing, middle of March, people were like, what do you have for sale? And then we sold everything out of our freezer. We had spinach growing in one of our hoop houses, and we sold, I think, about $3,000 worth of spinach. It was amazing. But people were buying whatever we had. And again, like here we've been, limping along, doing this wonderful work all these years, and people's like, yeah, I don't think so. It's too expensive. And it's like this golden opportunity to actually sell our food to the world in a way that, we've had a modest following all these years, but it's easy now. We hired a marketer, which is very important, I think, in our success. And I know I'm speaking to a diverse crowd of people. Some of you are gardeners and some of you are farmers, and trying to talk to everybody here. But that was a huge, smart move on our part. hired a person who, you know, she spends maybe 10 hours a week getting us on Facebook. She gets our CSA newsletter out every week instead of like once a month when I didn't have time to do that. We have a new monthly newsletter that goes to a list of 1,000 people that we've gathered over the years. We have an Instagram account. You know, I take videos for her all the time. Various people take videos and we get them up on Instagram of, you know, silliness and what's happening on the farm today and instructional stuff and, you know, kittens and whatever. And then the Willing Workers on Organic Farms, interestingly, that we had a bunch of woofers, and then we had a little dry spell. And I asked Nora to help me get us better placement on the woof site. And then all of a sudden now we have 4 people starting this week. So, you know, in terms of managing your supply, managing your, you know, accounts, managing the people that you need to work on the farm, having someone who's good at marketing in the mix is a really smart idea. We made really good hoop house sales. Like I said, we doubled the CSA this year, added 8,000 more square feet of land for veg, started taking woofers 1 to 3 at a time, and started taking anyone who wants to work, arrangements of all sorts. Like I said, these 2 boys who are scouts who are trying to get, one of them the Eagle and one of them is Life, have to put in 8 hours. So they were here today and they're going to come back on Wednesday. But so we are taking all sorts of folks. We've always worked with this, not always, for several years, maybe 10 years. We've worked with institutional in Barrie that has kids who are, they're in there as teenagers for either sex or violence crimes. And they have been coming out twice a week for a long time to work on the farm. It stopped during the beginning of COVID, but they just started coming back again. So all sorts of folks come here. Raise the salaries of the long-term employees, you know, to try to keep more consistency. The more people you have working here, the more you need people who are knowing what they're doing. And we have money in the bank, have had money in the bank from the start of the season, and we still have money in the bank right now. So it's very exciting. That's a new reality for us. So here are the pigs. They're in the woods. There are 6 of them. 2 of them are hiding somewhere, but they live in our woods. Pigs are woodland creatures. They can't sweat. And so this is just an ideal location for them. We move them every 2 to 3 weeks, and we have their feeder and their water out there in the field, out in the woods, and we make sure that their feed is full, and they have adequate water, but they do a lot of foraging out in the woods and kind of will re-stimulate growth there. At the same time, we can bring them, you know, starting to bring them excess of things that we want to get rid of or whatever. Wonderful to have pigs around, and they're such a wonderful all-purpose animal. We raise, you know, we make enough lard for our whole season, and you know, lard is an amazing fat, animal fat that's good for cooking, and you know, one of the best sources of vitamin D, for example. Really highly nutritious, not to mention all the pork and the pork stock and all the other things that we get from pigs. Here are our turkeys. They came over to get their picture taken. They're so sweet. But these guys are just moved out. They're 3.5 weeks old now, and they're out on the front lawn because we have predators who really like chicken and turkey. So we're keeping them close by as long as we can until they have to get out of the pasture. We bring them copious amounts of comfrey, which is their favorite dish. They go crazy when you bring in comfrey to them. I encourage anybody who has the room to plant some comfrey and let it move around. You know, and it's invasive, as they say, but you know, you can keep cutting it, keep serving it, and it'll really build their health. And it's also a good carbon sequester on its own right. Here's another picture of them attacking some comfrey, just like going crazy over it. And here they're out, this is last year's turkeys actually out on pasture, and you see all these wonderful things that are in the grass for them. That particular pasture that the turkeys live on, which is really an orchard, we run them through a different orchard than the chickens live on the other side of the farms, because they can share some diseases that turkeys are more likely to be taken down by blackhead, for example, is a disease that turkeys can get. But this particular orchard, the grass in there is really, you know, the plants per square foot is very thick, and we have all sorts of biodiversity there in the the grasses. Here are the chickens, like I said, on the other side of the farm. These are meat birds, and you can see behind this picture in the back of it, you can see where they were yesterday, the day before, and then they move into new grass every day. They eat it down and they manure it. This is mob stocking at its best. And they move on and they won't come back. These birds won't be back on that land ever again this year. They'll be off to slaughter. The layer chickens will probably cycle back onto this grass again after it's grown back. And meanwhile, we get a cutting of hay out of that early on, and maybe a late cutting of hay. So we have, intense fertility in our hay, which we then cut for mulch for the farm. So again, we're just all this recycling, supporting things back and forth on the farm. There's a dingo. I wanted to make sure you see our dogs. They're very important part of our security system. We had some issues in the last couple of weeks. I think it must have been a weasel, but you see where these houses, they raise up, the roof raises up a little bit. Neglected to fill in those, little 2 to 3 inch holes with anything, and I think they were getting in and killing birds. And then took care of that, and then there are some holes in the back where we have the handles for the houses where they rise up a little bit, and they got in that way, so we filled those in. Meanwhile, the dogs do go out there chained up at night, and we have a Armageddon every night out in the pasture. We hear all sorts of noisy coyotes, and I think some quieter animals that just come in and do their thing too. You see behind there, Mabel, there's that to the left, you see that open brown space that was just planted to a bunch of crops. That was the area that we actually put the tarp down and added more field to this year. We have some bees. We had enough honey to make it this year through June. It was very exciting. And there's Franny, who's our other dog. And then just also wanted to show you in this picture, our driveway is regularly filled with cars. It's funny how it all happened, but it's we just have a lot of people around all the time now, which is my idea of a good time. Here are, this is,
Well, you're not going to get into the kittens,
this is Scraps with hers and Eloise's kittens, but there are 10 kittens in there. They had them together at the same time, and so they live together. But our cats are also very important parts of our management team. They keep the vermin down. And anyway, so we always have kittens that we're giving away to people. So I just wanted to run quickly through some of the crops. This is black raspberries, maybe 3 weeks ago, before they started to be black. These guys we raise with copious amounts of cardboard and wood chips. And that's our general practice for these berries is cardboard and wood chips, and on a weekly nutrient spray. These are gooseberries. It's so fun. This is a small kind of bush that you can have anywhere. If you ever go to Lee Reich's workshops, Jack has been to a few of those, and he's, brought home a lot of different things. But gooseberries are in season right now and very tasty. Here's some blueberry plant over here on the left. Several blueberries that are in season right now for us too. Also cardboard and wood chips and lots of bindweed, which is a constant challenge for us, coming out of the soil and wrapping themselves around the plants. And here, yep.
Great. I'm going to start with the one that's most relevant to the current slides, and then I'm going to work backwards because there have been a few.
Okay.
So the first question is, what is the weekly nutrient spray for your berries?
So I shared that with you. Were you able to share that with people? I emailed that.
Sorry, what did you?
I emailed to you at 4:30 the list of the AEA sprays that we use.
Okay.
Did you see that?
I can go retrieve that and put it in the chat feature. Sure.
Yeah, if you can do that, because I have I can't remember all the things that are in all of these, but we have, and I'll go in talk about it in a little more detail. I don't have the recipes on these slides, but they're in. People will be able to get them off of this workshop.
Excellent. Yep, I will retrieve those and put them in the quotes. I mean, in the chat. So just quickly, a couple other questions. There was a question earlier about how to recruit productive woofers. So that might be something that, I don't know, do you want to try to address that briefly? How have you been?
I can. We only have 27 minutes, but I think hold a clear standard. And usually we've had some people leave. We've had 2 people leave, actually, who just realized that, oh, I thought, one guy was like, I thought that you didn't really have to work on the farm. I thought I could get away from this rush life that I'm in and come be on the farm. And we said, well, you know, we got to pay for that food you're having for supper tonight. You know, we got to, you know, do our taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And we do live in a capitalist system. And so he left after 10 days. You know, I think what I require a really high standard. You know, you get up early in the morning, you help cook, you know, you work for 5 hours and have lunch. And then if you want to work in the afternoon, people can actually, we let them work for hire on the afternoon if they want to. And we hustle. And so people sort themselves out very quickly. And I think it's just a matter of keeping a high standard, making it fun. As you can see, we're doing a lot of different things. So it's not like, okay, you woofers go out. There's a woman who's coming to us who I think was just relegated to weeding all day long and milking cows. And she said, I just, you know, I need to try another spot.
I think you need to work with them. You need to have somebody, a senior person working with them. If you just send them to go out there and weed or go out and do this and that, they don't have the self-discipline and the knowledge to keep up the pace. And you have to have somebody to set the pace, is my experience.
Yeah. And so like Anne here on the left is a working shareholder. Kathleen on the right is a hired person. Anne works a half a day a week, and she takes home food. And she is a wonderful example of somebody who, this is her 3rd year here. She's lost 60, 75 pounds, I think, coming here. Grew up in the South, worked on the farm, said she'd never go back to it. When she was 12, she left the farm, but it's like now she's got on this, you know, side street in Worcester, she has her entire porch filled with pails of dirt she got from our house that she took, and she's got her own little farm right on her front porch. And, you know, it's just so exciting to see how people can transform. She's really cleaned up her health, and she, you know, and still in the process, but she's just doing all sorts of stuff, food preservation, you name it, getting all of her friends to, you know, to come buy from us, etc. So yeah, make it fun, make it varied, and be out there, and don't ask anybody to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. Do you have any other questions? Sorry.
There are a few questions about living mulches, but I think you're probably going to get to that in a little bit, right? So maybe we should save those until later.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, great. Awesome, thank you.
This is another example, another view, I can't go about farm, of the houses behind you on the right of the picture. We're looking out across all the chicken tractors. You can see that field out there where it's brown again, where we just took the tarp up. And down below here we have blackberries in the long run, and then some young blueberries and other blueberries there. And you see the tall plants about this spot on the picture on the left. Those are it's a perennial strip that we have in the middle of the garden. So it just shows a few of the things. Those are old apple trees that were here when we came on that stone wall that you'll see across. One of them is bearing this year. Last year, another one bore. Here are some, I neglected to take a picture of these guys when they were actually having berries, but we have June berries this year. We planted these June berries 35 years ago, and this was the first year we really had fruit. So again, you know, all kudos to AEA for helping us with those fruit sprays. These are some elderberries with a lot of weeds around them. Haven't gotten around to weeding these guys yet, but another kind of berry. And here, some quick pictures of apples. These trees are full of apples this year, just loaded. These standard trees, and we let them grow as tall as they want to. I like to climb trees. We like to shake them. And we like the fact that they have a better ability to, you know, actually the roots have a better ability to mine for what they need than the dwarf varieties, yeah. Here's some grapes on the front of our house, along with my petunias that I take care of every day. It's a little bit of something I can control in nature, is my flower boxes. And here's another shot of some of our grapes coming in really nicely on another trellis. Pawpaws, we've got some of those last year for the first time. Here's our pear tree. You can see it's loaded to the gills. And peaches, last year was an incredible peach year, and this year they're taking it off a little bit. So we have reasonable amounts of peaches, but not, a lot of our trees were just almost died from the overbearing. Here's a picture of the Ripper, which is the tool that we got last July for the first time, and we had been spending too many hours trying to prepare our soil without the rototiller, which we used to have, and grass is coming in, you know, way too much. This area that she's ripping right now was full of grass, and we planted corn in there. We were able to get the grass down last year, but it's the bane of our existence, has been. And so now we're in this process of trying to keep the grass from taking over, and it's a year-long process. But anyway, this Ripper will dig down into the soil, and in our case, it was probably a really good thing because we had been tilling for so long that there was a plow pan. And even though we did like 3 years of no-till and had some remarkable results, we're thinking we're aerating it and giving it a little chance to, incorporate. Here I am, this is a couple days ago at the Rogue Hoe. I encourage you to get one. I'm standing over what we just had taken care of. We had lettuce in 1, 2, 3 beds. You see the third bed still has lettuce. This is last Thursday. We came through and hacked out all the little bit of grass in the pathways, and the pathways had kind of humped up too because we've been throwing crap up on them, kind of brought it all back down. Sprayed it all with Rejuvenate, which is a AEA product, which will help you kind of chew up, eat up a lot of the old residue, and then, you know, really bring in the biology. So that we did last Thursday. We ran out of time, but I'll show you another bed we got into right away. So Rejuvenate it and then draw our new rows in there and plant things right away. So that's our bed turnover process. Here's some little guys. We did have a person who didn't know what she was doing, putting those seeds down. You see, we've wasted a lot of brassica seeds, but this is that area that I told you about that was tarped. And it was, you know, really totally grass, but there's a lot of clumpiness to the soil, but I think it's, you know, it's turning over nicely. Here are some beets that were in another section that we had tarped, the other end of that whole field. You can see how beautiful these beets are coming up a little further along in the process. And the weed pressure is light for the very first part of that. Here's Kathleen. This day, so that morning there was it was an old lettuce bed. Stu and I came through and just hacked out what was left. He left an asparagus, was there from a previous life. And Kathleen came with the Rejuvenate and just sprayed it on really thickly. And then we made rows in it, and then that afternoon, I forget, they planted spinach in it that same afternoon. You see over to the right here are some nice soybeans, edamame, that this particular area, and I can tell when we really take care of the soil the year before, we get really good crops. So to Kathleen's left is the new land, and you see the green beans coming up, but to her right is where we had potatoes, and they were in very deep hay. So we find, and after a year after we've had really good mulch, that we have really nice crops. So
just a question, Julie.
Yes.
The Rogue Hoe that you use, that you mentioned, what does it look like? People are saying that they're finding more than one shape of a Rogue Hoe.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ones.
Big one, right?
It's no, I think we got the 7-foot, 6-foot handle. I can't remember. And someone asked me the model, and recently, and I think our model was not available. They've been changing it up a little bit. I'd call them up and talk to them and find out what your needs are. But the nice thing is it's rounded at the bottom. It's got a nice, you know, axe handle on it, but it also has some cutting capacity on the sides of the hoe too. All right, move on. Here's some of our hay. This is free hay that Dan found for us, and our other son-in-law, Dan, is helping him get it off the trailer last fall. Here's a little trick. We have permanent trellises, and we stick a lot of cardboard under there because there's grass coming up always, and then put the hay down as a way to try to keep those trellises a little clean. That's a challenge for us, is the grass coming up in there. So here's some shots of some of our crops. These are all pictures taken in July. So these are peas as they're starting to come into harvest. And in that pathway, we had a lot of hay down. And keep these permanent trellises. These are starting to build up to be really very nice trellis areas. This is I want a little advertisement for weeds, and the weed of the day right now is purslane. So we did lots and lots of dandelions. We've done lamb's quarters a couple times, and now the purslane is in in full regalia. And so, either for your own eating or for your CSA or whatever, these weeds are generally more nutritious than any of the vegetables that you attempt to grow. They come in when they know exactly when the time is right, and they just make wonderful food. These are nice ground cover also because they lay kind of flat, and so I was just reading last night where they'll actually, any ground cover is going to help hold the moisture in the soil. It's going to help hold the soil structure together. So eat them and leave them when you can, and enjoy them. Here's just a beauty shot of our chard. We tend to raise really nice looking chard here, and this year it's been out of this world. Here's some beautiful basil. And here's that chard, the massive plants, and our corn on the left, which that corn is now like 7 feet tall, doing really well. We went through this whole section of the field and mulched the hell out of it with hay this spring. There are those soybeans again from above. And I just wanted to show you too, here's someone was asking about growing your mulch. When we planted our cucumbers and our squashes, you'll see in the next few pictures, we put down a lot of hay at the time that we planted them. Sadly, that was on the, I think on the 28th or something of May, and then on the 30th, the frost came through and wiped out a lot of those plants. But the hay was down, we replanted, but there in the bare soil spots, I came through maybe 2-3 weeks ago and just sprinkled crimson clover. And so this crimson clover is coming in very nicely. It's a nice lower plant, especially if you don't plant it too early. You want to make sure that you're not planting any of these cover crops while your plants that you're trying to support are when they're big enough, not when they're too small. But this will give it a complete, a continual nitrogen feed into the system, and really do all the other services that any kind of cover crop will do. Here's a nice shot too. I'm very, very proud of these cucumbers. They have see that nice blue cast to them, really very healthy. And the summer squash also. We had, luckily last week we had 2 inches of rain on Wednesday night. It got up to 90 degrees again. Another inch of rain on Thursday, and up to 90 degrees again. So this is like summertime in the city for these plants. They're really thriving, full bore. More squash. And here's another shot. These are around some winter squash. You can see again the clover starting to come in. So I try to, as much as possible, make sure that the soil is not uncovered. And that's hard. It's very hard to do. But one of the ways, we had a bunch of people working. We were able to do a lot of mulching, which takes a lot of time. And then we got short on people. And that's when I started using clover. It's like, okay, we can't wait to mulch. We've got to just put the clover down, and that'll be our living mulch. So a lot of it is just managing your resources. How many people do we have? How much hay do we have? Or whatever it is you're using. And what needs to be done on the farm right now. So constantly trying to figure that out. And just to say a little thing about the perennials that we work very hard to get all of our perennials cardboarded and wood chipped in the off season, so like October through April. We have a significant amount of perennials, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of wood chips. We get 10 loads of wood chips a year from our local, from our DPW, and just load them on so that we can have those perennials under control. So when annual time comes, where we're really disturbing the soil, we can focus more on them. Here's a tomato, one tomato plant in our hoop house, looking kind of nice and big. Very happy with our tomatoes this year. One of the things I've struggled with, and I asked Nathan at AEA, okay, help me with the special tomato drench, and he did. And you know, this is the kind of power we're getting. We don't have many tomatoes yet, but it's going to be an incredible year for us. Just another shot. This is a shot of some sage and oregano and thyme and a few other perennial herbs, trying to put them in around the edges of things to have all these perennials to work with. Great for the CSA, great for your health. I mean, they have such power, nutrient power, herbs do, to add them to your food to help, again, with that food is medicine piece. These are some peppers. I didn't get to them with the mulching, and so we just clovered those. I would have preferred to have mulch on them, but didn't have the time. And here are onions that are, we mulched with leaves that we got off the side of the road. And that's a good example, another thing to mulch with. Over on the left, you'll see our brassicas have done extremely poorly this year, and I haven't had really the bandwidth to try to figure out what the story is and what was the story. They're starting to come back right now, but it's going to be my focus crop next year is how to really deal with the brassica issues. It's a humbling opportunity. Every year is a humbling opportunity. So I got that one all figured out, and then next year, kale was always our best crop, right? And so we couldn't raise it to, here you see these little piddling kale plants. This is in July, and can't raise it to save our lives this year. Here's our lettuce, usually a standard, a really good thing for us. We plant it on about 12-inch centers on an open bed, and it grows in. A really good crop for us. This is across the, again, standing back, you saw those beets earlier, looking toward the house. You see the potatoes are in that second section, and you can see that they're holding on but not doing that well this year. And I know a lot of that is because our soil was not prepared properly. From the year before, again, it's like, what did you do last year to get what you need to have happen this year? We had too much grass in there. We were raising some cutting greens, and really we're not, you know, we're not able to get that proper preparation in there. So you often pay for your mistakes. Just as a little bit about the people. This is Julia, who quit her job in corporate America, you know, because of COVID, and came out here to work. She moved out here, and she's working out here for the summer anyway. Very proud chicken mover right now. Here's Simon. This is a guy that only lasted 10 days, actually. That was a nice picture of him anyway. Here's Leo on the right with Jack. Leo was a woofer who was going to leave on May 24th. He came to our farm on the 30th of March, and he's from France, and he couldn't get a ticket out. They wouldn't let him out. So he ended up being here until middle of July. He was with us for 3.5 months, and he was a go-getter. He worked about 60 hours a week. He was one of those people that did his 30 hours, and then we paid him extra. I think he saved like $3,500, and finally went back to France, and he became like a son to us. And here we are. This is an interesting story about the rhubarb, actually. But here's AJ, who said something about, I have to farm now. That's what has to happen. And over here is Chloe, who is a student from Mount Holyoke, and then Julia, who I told you about. But for the first time this year, our rhubarb grew back so well that we had a July harvest. I usually just harvest it in June and let it go. But we filled 3 of those 5-gallon pots with rhubarb because we were able to, the high productivity. The perennials are generally doing really well right now. We have years and years of lots of cardboard and chips, and then these, weekly sprays that we're unrelenting with. This is a shot of a bunch of people on a Friday. The kind of, we oftentimes have 12, 13 people here at a time. Today we had 8 people, and we still couldn't get the CSA done by noon. We have so much food right now. Here's Dave, who his primary role for us is that he helps us keep our tractor running and all of our machinery. And he has been a life, lifesaver, to have. I think what's amazing is that in any growing system, you can accommodate so many different people and all the skills, and understanding what your skills are and what other people's skills are and where you bring in the skills that you need to help make things happen. He also helped us, I hope I can find a picture. Oh, the sprayer, I should go back to that, but Dave helped us get a new sprayer. It's a Stihl model, S-T-I-H-L. I forget what the model number is, but we have had, you know, serious problems keeping our sprayers running, and we now have a really good system. It's a mist blower that usually people use for spraying, chemicals, but it does the trick for us. And Claire can wear it on her back. Here's a bunch of people that showed up, a couple Russians that were in town for a while, and this is a brother over here, a cousin of a guy who's coming once a week to just learn from us. This is our asparagus patch, which was out of control. We call it our pollinator garden. We had, I think, 12 people that day, and in an hour and 20 minutes, we got it all cleaned up. So, you know, just in massive numbers of people to help make this operation work. The recipes that we use for our foliar sprays from AEA, we have a transplant solution. We spray that on the soil. There's a vegetative one for things like greens. There's a fruiting vegetables one for things that have fruit, like, you know, corn, peas, beans, tomatoes, etc. Rejuvenate between the bed turnover, the small fruit during cell division, small fruit during cell division expansion and fruit set, cell expansion and fruit set, sorry. Tree fruit during cell division, tree fruit during cell expansion and fruit set, and then post-harvest fruit. So they get pretty intricate, and I have found using their advice, I've been able to really up the quality and quantity of our food. Multi-species winter kill cover crops, late August to late September, intersown in living crops or on finished crop areas. Intersown crimson clover and shorter cover crops early, under brassicas, tomatoes, corn, etc., to enhance crop health, starting in early July, as soon as plants are big enough. Early oats and peas on areas that won't be planted until early July. We ran around and did a lot of that this year. I've heard so much stuff about oats being one of the best things for the soil. Using silage tarps strategically through the season, cardboard and hay, leaves. Maximize keeping the soil covered, you know, living best, dead as necessary. Animals in rotation, bring them in. You know, you have 120-day rule for, chicken for manure before you can plant again. But in the fall, we'll run those turkeys right through those beds because they're not dead until November. And then sometimes plant rye after that. The Ripper bar in moderation, and well-targeted foliar sprays and soil drenches. So those are the kinds of things that we try to keep in mind at all times. And here's just a few things about the a lot of references to Christmas. People get very excited about our food, and that makes it fun to grow it. That makes it feel like we're really doing what needs to be done. I guess that's it.
Make sure we fully address the question about living mulch. I know you talked about planting clovers, but what about any other living mulch species that you might have experimented with?
Well, like I said, I didn't really experiment with it, but it experimented with me, and that is the purslane. And, you know, there are a lot of little things that come in on the ground, and I wouldn't just rip them out because they're a weed. They're usually filling a niche. They're usually doing something for the soil. So whenever possible, you know, embrace those perennials and use what they have to offer you, and keep an eye on them. We have a lot of bugle that has come in recently. And, you know, I tend to let it stay there if it wants to because it's small and it doesn't, you know, cause problems. But living mulch is my favorite, is crimson clover. The rest of them start getting much bigger, but you can, you know, the oats, we've had little oats, you know, all around the place. I like to leave a lot of dandelions. We serve those up, but they're in the pathways and they're doing some nice taproot work. You know, the comfrey, again, behaving itself. We put it around under our fruit trees because it'll be a pollinator haven for things that'll help keep your fruit trees healthy. I think being creative with plants that aren't too tall that are going to enhance the system.
Julie, related to the question of comfrey, we had one attendee who was having trouble finding comfrey. Do you have any recommendations for where to look to get it?
I can give whoever it is a plant. We got ours 35 years ago. I have no idea, but happy to send you a plant, or you can come by, depending on where you live.
All right, well, you can look up Many Hands Organic Farm and give Julie a call at the farm. Okay, another question was, are you concerned at all about the wood chips and leaves that you're bringing into the farm? How do you know that they're not, they haven't been chemically treated, or if they are you worried about that?
Well, the leaves are from our road side, and not many people drive up and down the road, so not worried about those. The wood chips are, the town chips and trees, and then they park them at the DPW. There's always a concern with toxins in our environment, and you just have to weigh they have to weigh it. What I've seen with wood chips is that they have only done good things on our farm. And if you have an active microbial life, then they're going to be able to detoxify stuff, just like with cardboard, with the glues in the cardboard, they'll detoxify it. And if you have a lot of worms, then they've figured that out.
Awesome. Well, we are just about wrapping up and out of time. Julie, do you want to just share how people can reach you if they have follow-up questions? It seems like you're open to being contacted by folks.
Yes, they can come work on the farm if they'd like. And you can reach me at julie@mhof.net. That stands for Many Hands Organic Farm. You can email me, so you can call me at 978-257-1192. But we really love to have people come and work for a morning and have lunch, come early and have breakfast. And we always have a good time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julie. One quick note that I'm going to drop in a link for the CEO and QR codes if you are hoping to get your session covered for continuing education. We'll just drop a link into that, into the chats right now. Unless, Jocelyn, you are able to, the link is broken. Jocelyn, are you able to share that screen? Oh, there it is, great. There's a link to check to see if you can get this session covered for your continuing education. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us, and we hope that we'll